Well, let me thank all of you in the audience, all you moms and dads, for taking time out of your busy day to allow us to suggest some educational programs which may be in your interest. And I do appreciate you being here. That's my picture on what you're looking at now on the screen, my handsome face. I've been told I have a great face for radio. Now, we will have a time in a little bit for questions from you. So please jot them down and please ask whatever questions you wish. And I think after we go through some material, some questions will suggest themselves to you. So about myself, I'm a professor of English at Ohio State University in Columbus, Ohio. We are the largest single campus in the country. We have 60,000 full-time students on one campus. And so everything is done in a big way. And for a number of years, I was the assistant provost of the university and got a chance to see how everything functions from 50,000 feet. I received my BA, MA, PhD in English from Princeton University in New Jersey. And I've been an English professor for 35 years at Ohio State. I've written in all genres, all types of pieces, 4 books, 70 articles. I've also, this was one of the highlights of my career, I enjoyed being the chairman of the committee that wrote the Scholastic Aptitude Test, that is the SAT. I was that chair of that committee for probably 15 years, and I also wrote the advanced placement exams for 15 years and engaged in the evaluation of those exams. Those weren't just dashed off quickly. It required a lot of work and research and time. I was also the chair for a number of years of the College Board National Advisory English Committee, and we've made recommendations for how to teach high school English, for changes in curriculum in high school English. We were always very concerned about high school students and what they were learning in their English classes, and I think most of our suggestions were implemented by school districts. But the greatest thing I think I have accomplished, besides being a father and a husband, is that I've received several university-wide awards for distinguished teaching. I love students. I'm doing exactly what I've wanted to do all my life, and I take teaching and students very seriously. I've also received the university's Distinguished Affirmative Action Award. I've worked a lot in that area as well. Now, let's get a little on to why is writing important? I don't think there's any area of academics more important than writing. Reading and writing, let's say. It's one of our basic ways to communicate, and the ability to write effectively, clearly, logically, and cogently is a fundamental requirement for success in all academic settings and in the workplace as well. High schools and universities recognize its centrality to learning and to thinking and to communicating. And so they're continually requiring students to write in all their courses. You might say, well, my student is interested in STEM courses. She wants to be a math major. They're still going to write papers. You can't get away from it anymore, because I think all educational institutions now recognize that people don't write well. I think we've produced a generation of people that don't write especially well, and that is changing radically. And furthermore, any types of communication that you might think of writing, speeches, blogs, podcasts, they all start in written form. There's nothing more fundamental to the educational process than to knowing how to write clearly, convincingly, persuasively. Now, what does poor writing do? If some of you are working, I'm sure you've run across this, I run across it all the time, or receive a white paper or some type of a memo from someone, and the idea might be okay, but the writing is so bad. There are typos, misspellings, terrible grammar, and that I think then that the person can't think very much of me to send me that idea in such a form. And actually, that kind of poor writing, someone's shooting himself in the foot. It undermines what the person is saying. It undermines the credibility of the person writing it, and it undermines the credibility of the importance of the topic. And you probably have also seen this in emails, where some people will send you emails that are just atrocious. They're not logically organized. You don't even know what you're reading about until you get to the second paragraph. Lots of mistakes in them, grammar mistakes. It is something that we're just surrounded by. And I think that this is what we want to address is that people, when they are writing something, they've done research, they've done thinking. I want the quality of that writing to reflect the quality of their thinking. Now, writing is also a form of thinking. Let me stress that for a minute. We all know that writing is a form of communication. I mean, that's the given. But it actually is a form of thinking. It's the ultimate form of thinking, in fact. Let me say this, you don't understand an idea until you've written it down on paper or on the screen. You might think you understand an idea, but when you start to put words to it, to define it, to really say what it is, to organize it, to understand it more fully, you start then to see gaps in your logic. You start to see, well, but this doesn't really hold together as well as I thought it did. You start to see that your thinking was a little fuzzy. You thought you understood the topic, but when you actually get down to putting a logical case together, you see that it's really a thinking problem. I have not thought this through. There are nuances that I'm going to have to deal with in what I'm saying. There are shadings that I'm going to have to deal with. There are gaps in my logic that I'm going to have to deal with. And writing forces us to think an idea through thoroughly. And again, I'm going to say it, you don't really understand an idea until you explain it in a couple of paragraphs of prose. And you start to see then what you're saying, maybe from a different perspective. I thought I understood the idea from my perspective, but maybe there are other perspectives I think about. You have to analyze your audience. I mean, who is it that you're writing to? You want to say the things, or at least use the approach that this person will accept and not inflame the person. So I think the importance of writing is also in thinking. Those two things together, thinking and writing. And writing is hard. I always tell the students that. I tell them that it's going to be difficult. Don't expect to panacea to change overnight. There's no magical incantation. There are no magical pills you can take. Writing is hard. Think about it. And I think that's why, by the way, a lot of people don't like to write. When you're talking to someone, let's envision this. Now, you and a person are standing a few feet apart from each other. You're talking, okay? And this person is looking at you. You ever ask yourself, how is that person understanding what I'm saying? How is that person getting my meaning? Many studies have been done on that. Let me give you the results of them. When you're speaking to someone standing in front of you, 55% of your message is being communicated in body language and facial gestures. What are we doing with our eyes? Where are we looking? What are we doing with our arms? There are tiny muscles on either side of our lips that involuntarily tighten when we're tense, just a little bit. But, we've been taught from the time we were kids how to read facial expressions, how to know if someone is mad, if someone is happy, how to pick up these subtle signs of how they're standing, their body movements. That is 55% of the message. Now think of this, when you're writing an essay, you don't have any of that, do you? The person can't see you, you're not there. There's another 30%, so that's 50%, 55%. 30% is your tone of voice. Are you being happy, sad, ironic, dramatic? Let me give you the same sentence 5 times with 5 different meanings, dependent only on my tone of voice. Okay? I did not say he stole the money. I did not say he stole the money. Someone else said it. I did not say he stole the money. Maybe I just implied it. I didn't say he stole the money. I didn't say he stole the money. Maybe just borrowed it, right? I didn't say he stole the money. Okay, which is correct? You get that in an email. You get that in an essay. This is why there's so much misunderstanding in emails and ambiguity in emails. Emails don't pick up the tone of voice. You're not there to say it. And there are widely different interpretations, right, of the same sentence. Now, put that into the written issues we have in writing an essay. You're not there for the person to stop and say, what did you mean by that? Or, oh, can you say a little bit more about that? You're not there. That person's not there. You're not there. The person's reading what you wrote yesterday. So you have to rely solely on your words and on shades of meaning in your words, on the connotations of your words. You can find synonyms. They mean the same thing, but the connotation is much different. You have to carefully select then, your words to create the right tone. And again, there's no place to hide when you're writing. It's not a team sport. And you have to, for instance, anticipate what that person is going to ask you. That is, when you're writing something, you have to ask yourself, okay, this is very clear to me. I'm doing the writing. But is there another way of looking at what I just said? And if there is, you have to account for that. You have to make sure the person doesn't misunderstand what you said. Is there something ambiguous in what I said? Well, then let me make it crystal clear. So it's hard. It's challenging. Now, how does one perfect writing? By writing. There is, as I said, no magical formula anyone can give you. And the way I often, when I'm talking to students, and when I'm talking to your students, I'll use the same analogy. I like to compare it to learning a musical instrument. You can't cram to play the piano, can you? Now, you can't take a week course or 2-week course and suddenly play the violin. How do you learn to play the piano? You practice, you practice, you practice. How do you play the violin? Again, it's not an overnight wonder. You simply keep at it. You keep at it. You're discouraged at times, but you see the prize at the end, and you keep working at it. I guess you could use the same analogy with serving a tennis ball, or hitting a golf ball. There's no short way of doing it. You have to go through the process. And writing, like learning a musical instrument, is a process. It isn't a one-day wonder. You have to start and keep at it and keep at it and keep at it, and you will get better. There's no question about that. If you start by writing with an instructor like myself or your high school teachers, critiquing what you write, helping you understand what the problems are, how it could have been done better, that's how you improve. It's just as simple as that or as hard as that. And I'll provide a very detailed critique for each student. And we'll cover issues such as grammar, punctuation, logic, all of the mechanics of writing, logical flow of ideas, paragraph development. We'll cover all that. That's no problem. Clarity of expression, precision in the use of words, the organization of the paper, the effectiveness of it. Your students will get better. I can promise you. It's again, like picking up the violin, and at first it sounds scratchy, but after a while you have what I like to call with students a breakthrough, where suddenly it's all falling into place. Classes will not be boring. As I said, I adore students. I think too highly of them to bore them. There will be no time wasted because I am very committed to this idea that writing is essential to our thinking and communicating. And I'll use a wide variety of teaching materials, some of which I've created. I'll have various handouts. We'll do a lot of different approaches so that students won't become bored. And we'll also read the papers that students write so they can see what their, it'll be anonymous, of course, but so they can see what their peers are writing. And we will help each other in that sort of group form by Zoom to talk about common issues, common mistakes, because generally students make the same mistakes. We're alike enough that what one student is doing is probably what another student is doing. Now, here is one of the 3 courses I want to talk about tonight. This is writing essays, and I've selected the 4 most common types of essays that students write in high school and in college. The first is a narrative essay. This simply is a personal story, something important that happened to you in your life, an experience, something you saw. It can be a big thing. Oftentimes they're not big things. Oftentimes they're little things that, well, think of your own life. Was there a time when you heard something or someone said something to you or you saw something and an epiphany took place? You suddenly had that aha moment. I never saw it this way. I never thought of that. That's the importance of the narrative essay, to describe an event, as well as you can. Describe whatever this event was. It could be a party, it could be a trip that you took with your family, whatever it is. But then, why is it significant? Why did this stick with you? Why are you telling me about it? Then there's the analytical essay, and this and the persuasive essay are probably the two most common in high school and college. An analytical essay is simply you analyze something, examine it, evaluate it. Global warming, is it for real? Is it a myth? The internet, does it help education or not? How can it better help education? I'm going to write about capitalism. I'm going to examine a concept. I'm going to examine something that is being debated now. The value of, let's say, cell phones. And that's where you analyze. So you take something apart, you break it into its little parts, and you analyze it. It demands, obviously, great, wonderful conceptual skills. That's what I mean about thinking and writing. You can't write an analytical essay without doing a lot of thinking about what it is I am analyzing. Then there's the persuasive essay. And this, of course, is something we do every day of our lives verbally. You want somebody to adopt your point of view. So should we have school uniforms? I'm going to argue that we should have school uniforms. Should we ban cell phones in high school? I'm going to argue that we should ban cell phones in high school. And I'm going to persuade you to adopt my position. One of the techniques which I teach the students is to play the devil's advocate. That is, when you're advancing a position, let's say that I want to wear uniforms in school, try to anticipate what someone who disagrees with you will say. And then in your essay, counter what that person says by showing that that's not true. For instance, if you wanted to write an essay, I want to, wear uniforms in school, somebody might say, well, no, that infringes on my independence. That infringes on my freedom of choice. I don't want to be told what to wear. That's a legitimate counter. It's a legitimate argument. So if you want to convince someone, though, that you should be wearing uniforms in school, you have to then take that argument and disprove it. That you really don't have a lot of freedom in school. You don't have freedom of how long your classes are, when the school day starts and ends. You don't have freedom in selecting your teachers. In many cases, you can't select your own courses. I mean, this myth that I'm going to be free, it really is a myth. You're not really that free in high school. And think of the freedom you would have in the morning, and you don't have to pick out clothing. You don't have to pick out stuff that matches. So again, you make the persuasive essay there. You don't also have to spend a lot of money buying clothes to keep up with rich people. Descriptive essays are wonderful. The students love them. This is where you can become a little creative. I hope a lot creative, in fact. When we do talk about creativity and the imagination, that's very much an important part of our thinking, to think outside the box, and it's an important part of writing. So in this, students will describe something they did, an event, an experience, but in vivid, colorful detail, so that the reader will be able to picture it. And why students like it is you're allowed in something like this to embellish. And you can sort of put a lot of whipped cream on things, and it allows that creativity to come through. Then there's something in addition, which I hope you're interested in. That's the editorial essay. I like to see students send their writing to various places to compete. I think it's a nice idea to get used to the idea that life is so competitive, but also to have enough pride in what you've done that I'm going to send it somewhere. And even if you don't win, it's kind of fun just entering it. I would like them to be able to write an editorial for your local paper. Or does your paper have an opinion column? Many papers do. We do in Columbus, and folks like yourself will write in something about themselves. Any of these essays would fit into that topic. Mostly, I think an analytical essay, and a persuasive essay. Those two probably would be the most common types of topics to be put in an editorial essay. Now, there is a structure for editorial essays, and I'll talk about that. In some of our classes, about midway through, I'll start talking about that, because I would like the students to take one of these 4 essays that they've written, and let's massage it into an editorial essay, something you could send to, not say to your local paper, or for this New York Times editorial contest. It takes place in April. And I think it'd be nice just to be able to say I competed in it. And I think it's a way also of encouraging students to become engaged with ideas in the community, in the audience, through short essays. Now, let's see. Okay. Why don't you ask me your questions now that you have? You must have some, and please, any question is fine. And if I don't answer it right, just tell me that's not good enough. Can I hear from you? I'm going to do this too, so that I realize your students are in school and they're probably very busy people with extracurricular activities. This will not be that time consuming for them. They'll only have to write an essay every other week. The essays will not be long, maybe 350, 450 page words. So, probably a page and a half. And so it shouldn't cut into their time very much. And I hope, because these will be topics that they choose, that a teacher didn't choose for them, that they'll be inherently interested in what they're writing about. So let me ask again, any questions? Well, okay, then why don't you, again, keep in mind that we'll have time again to ask questions, so jot them down. I wanted to show you an example or two of essays that students wrote in the fall. We taught something very much like this course last fall, and I think it went over very well. Here is a descriptive essay that is it was the last of the 4, where this lady, young woman, is describing a day at the beach. Let me tell you something about her. Her first essay, the narrative essay, was okay, just barely okay. An essay, the analytical one, she improved quite a bit. The third essay, she had her breakthrough. Her persuasive essay was really good. And then she wrote this essay, and I think this is just superb. And I'll ask you to evaluate it yourself. But what I wish you could see, if we have the time, I'd like to show you all 4 of her essays, so you can see a mind at work, so you can see a mind developing a talent. And of course, she was well motivated too. But let's look at this. And listen, anything you want to talk about it with me, let's do that. Anytime you want me to stop and talk about something, or you want to mention something you find really good or not, let us know. Please don't hold back. So she starts out telling us exactly what the situation is. It's spring break in the middle of March of my sophomore year in high school. Okay, watch how she creates visual images of what she's talking about. Watch her selection of adjectives. Watch how she really involves our 5 senses in what we're talking about. Usually when people write a description, they're really talking about what they see. But this young woman lets you taste it, lets you feel it, lets you smell it. And when you can hit all our senses, that's a very convincing essay. So let's start. And again, she had to obviously rewrite this at least once, maybe twice. This doesn't come right from the brain immediately. The salty, okay, so we get that idea of salt in the air. Floating breeze of Miami's coast is enough to make my knees go weak. I think that's a strong opening. My goodness, if her knees are weak, this must really be an experience for weaken the knees of a sophomore in high school. I look into the cloudless blue sky. And again, not just I look into the sky, but it's cloudless and it's blue. I mean, those adjectives help, again, us picture it. It's visual now. And see absolute happiness. Isn't that fantastic? I mean, the clouds aren't, a cloudless sky isn't happy. The blue sky isn't happy. She's happy. She's looking into those and feels this absolute happiness. In the distance, rolling clear blue waves crash. Okay, in the distance now, she didn't just say waves crash, but rolling. And we got that idea of that motion of the waves. And they're clear blue. And they're not just hitting each other, they're crashing into each other with such force as that of football players. Great comparison, isn't it? It's a simile that the waves, when you hear them, I don't know if you've ever been close to football players practicing, but their equipment makes a lot of noise when they hit each other. And here she's comparing that sound to the crashing of the waves against each other. Again, making us, you really hear it there too. That's our ear now, not just our eyes. I squint in the distance of the resting white caps and come upon a floating yacht. Okay. Focusing my attention to the beach, I observed middle-aged people resting on beach towels, children creating sandcastles or frolicking in the ocean, and young couples holding hands while walking along the shoreline. Isn't that a beautiful sentence? I mean, it has three parts. And what makes it so readable is those three parts are all in parallel to each other. So our mind doesn't have to try to figure out how is the second one related to the first, how's the third related to the first two. Let's go over it again. Focusing my attention on the beach. Now, watch the three. I observe middle-aged people resting on towels. Now, she doesn't say the I observe here, but it's what starts the whole process. I observe children creating sandcastles and frolicking in the ocean. Isn't frolicking a good word too? Not just playing. Isn't there a difference? Here's word choice of connotation. If you look that up in a dictionary, frolicking and playing would probably be listed together, but they're not the same, are they? I mean, frolicking is what children do. It's what they do on the beach and in the ocean. I mean, that word is almost reserved for children playing and creating sandcastles. Okay? And I observe young couples holding hands while walking along the shoreline. Doesn't it flow so well because those three clauses are in parallel? And think of how she covers the universe. Middle-aged people, okay? Children, much younger, and people in between, lovers, walking along the shoreline, holding hands. Pretty good. I close my eyes. Again, she wants to really appreciate it. When you really want to appreciate something, don't you often just close your eyes so there are no distractions? I just want to see it in my mind's eye. I close my eyes and take in all of my surroundings and run my fingers slowly and freely through my shoulder-length brown hair as I take in the smell of the salty evening air that tingles my nostrils. Watch the senses of our five senses. I close my eyes, so we have the idea of sight, but she's denying her sight. I run my fingers, so that's tactile, right? You're touching something. I'm running my fingers through my hair. I can smell the salt in the air, and it even tingles my nostrils. So you have sight, touch, and smell all in that one sentence to create this scene in front of our eyes. When you read something like this and you can almost see it, you can see it happening, it didn't happen by accident. It happened by careful word choice and how the words are presented. I feel like a seagull drifting endlessly in the wind without a care in the world. Isn't that lovely to feel that way? Comforted, that's how ecstatic she feels. Comforted by the rolling waves, distant voices, and the laughter of people nearby. And again, you have that structure of three. I'm comforted by rolling waves, distant voices, and the laughter of people. Let's go in the ocean, a young girl says. Simply as she just heard. It's so hot out, an old woman yells. Feeling the warmth of the mid-afternoon day, I let myself absorb the blistering rays of the sun while opening my mouth to the sweetness of the evening air. Again, look at the senses there. Feeling the warmth, that's tactile, right? That's touch of the mid-afternoon day. I let myself absorb the blistering rays. That's tactile again, I think. Your skin, reflects that. But now we have something else. Opening my mouth to the sweetness of the evening air. She's asking you to taste that sweetness of the air. Isn't that a brilliant way of talking about the sweetness of the air, to make you taste it? I am taken in by the soothing, relaxing, peaceful atmosphere. Now let's go to our next paragraph. I stroll along. Well, now, if you looked in a dictionary or a thesaurus, stroll would be another word for walk. But think of the difference. I walk along or I stroll along. what are the connotations of stroll that walk doesn't have? Yeah, stroll is more leisurely, isn't it? Walk is something you kind of have an end in mind. It's something that you do that's strong. You're walking, running, but strolling is just just being kind of casual about everything, and that's the mood that she's in. Walk would not be the right word. I stroll along, and the grainy, slick brown sand pulls my bare feet under and leaves a perfect imprint. We've all experienced this at the beach, right? Where your foot sort of sinks into the sand. But think of how she's describing the sand. Grainy, yeah, slick, okay. Brown, okay. And it pulls her feet. Well, no, your feet sink into it, but it feels like you're being pulled, doesn't it? And leaves a perfect imprint. Comforted by the sounds of the ocean and the rhythmic pounding of the waves, all of my worries disappear. Wonderful concept. I become enveloped by everything around me. Now, what you see there is a lovely sentence construction, which she did not start out doing with her first paper. And it's something I teach the students to do. If you have two independent clauses, and I don't get caught up, by the way, with terminology, but independent clause means this: a group of words that by themselves could be a sentence. Okay, so we have two of them there. Comforted by the sounds of the ocean and the rhythmic pounding of the sea waves, all my worries disappear, period. That would be a sentence, okay? I became enveloped by everything around me. That could be a sentence. It has a subject, I, as a verb, enveloped, as an object, me. Now, many high school, even college writers would make those two different sentences, or put after disappear a comma and then the word and. Not be grammatically correct, but using when you remove the and, if you have these two independent sentences and you're removing a conjunction like and, but, or, you put in a semicolon. And doesn't it read better? Comforted by the sounds of the ocean and the rhythmic pounding of the waves, all of my worries disappear. I become enveloped by everything around me. It makes that pause that you have to make there with the semicolon, makes that second half, I think, sound more dramatic, stronger. Taking a seat down on the warm and uneven dry sand, I run my hand delicately over the smooth surface, leaving a trail from my fingertips. I pick up a handful and sift it from my palm slowly. We've all done that, right? Feeling the grittiness of the sand with each finger. Again, feeling it too. Then deciding to be adventurous, I stand and begin to brave the rumbling waves that are inches away. Well, let's look at that. I stand and begin to brave. The idea of brave is that she has to be courageous because the waves are cold, and they're breaking. Brave is a good word then, and the rumbling waves. Not just I stand and begin to walk into the waves. It's to brave, and they're rumbling. They're moving. They're kinetic. They're inches away. Charging into the ocean, not walking into the ocean, right? Walking into the ocean is bland, isn't it? That's kind of flat. But charging into the ocean, I mean, when you charge, you really have commitment, right? I'm charging at the enemy, charging into the ocean with vigorous splendor and utter excitement. I insert my bare feet into the sea and am taken aback by the shocking coolness, I would have made maybe frigid, of the water. I almost hyperventilate. Look at that construction again. It's that same thing of the two clauses that each could be a sentence, but she combines them with a semicolon. So, charging into the ocean with glorious splendor and utter excitement, I insert my bare feet into the sea and am taken back by the shocking coolness of the water. Could be a period there, but there isn't. I'm taken back by the shocking coolness of the water. I almost hyperventilate. Can you see why that construction makes that I almost hyperventilate even stronger? Like she's sort of building up to it, and then in just a few words, telling you how excited and frightened she is. I'm hyperventilating. Without the semicolon, just wouldn't read as well. Bringing myself to a halt at mid-calf, I then trudge through the soft currents that splash upon my legs. An abundance of vibrantly colored, not just fish, but vibrantly colored fish, and variously sized fish swarm around my feet. Their bodies brush my leg with negligence, as they strive to get from one place to another. The negligence, I had trouble with that word. I don't think it really fits there. Well, it can be, but I think there's something better. First of all, I'd be scared to heck if I had fish hitting my leg. Their bodies brush my leg with ignorance, uncertainty, with not knowing they're there, I'm here. Something, that idea that they don't know you're even there. They're doing this with just casualness as they strive to get from one place to another. I wish to stay here forever and realize at this point, this is where I need to come for serenity and peace, where all things seem perfect and carefree. There is nowhere in the world quite like this, so peaceful and serene. What do you think of the essay? Do you think it's pretty sophisticated? You're talking about maybe a 15-year-old. Wonderful use of language. And it didn't come instantaneously to her. This is her fourth essay. This is after 8 weeks. But I think the progress is terrific. And she obviously was willing to spend the time to perfect her writing. And she did. I loved college courses that had a writing element where you had to write papers in it, because I could write well in college. And I knew that any course that had a paper, I was going to get an A in the paper, which really helps the rest of your grade in the course. Any questions about this? Well, okay. Now, what are some of the things we'll be doing? Effective and clear writing will also be taught by examining prose passages and grammar questions from the Scholastic Aptitude Test. I still have some of the questions I wrote, and I still write them, by the way. And I don't know if they already used the ones I've written in the last year or not. I don't know. But I'm going to use that format to show them how grammar questions and writing questions are asked on the SAT, so that when they get to that program, it won't seem strange. They'll have seen it somewhere before. And again, I spent 15 years participating in writing the English section of the SAT. Students will also receive a 14-page booklet on common grammar, punctuation, and usage mistakes. Now, this is something I created. I've been teaching English for a long time. And I found that most of the mistakes, the old principle that 80% of the problems come from 20% of the causes, the Pareto principle. Well, I found that maybe 85% of grammatical problems, grammar, punctuation, word usage, agreement of tenses, maybe 85% come from really a handful of mistakes. And what I did was to write down or collect the most common mistakes that students make. I did not put into that list something that will happen once a year, some odd construction, that a student gets wrong. I wanted this to be useful for them. So I kept it to 14 pages. But there, the 14 pages that will probably represent 90% of the mistakes they would have made if they would just consult the booklet. And they will get the booklet and we'll use it during the course. This is a booklet. It's a resource. Think of it as that way, that you can use in high school, in college, and in the workplace. I have given this booklet to any number of colleagues who are not at the university, but in the workplace, for them to use as a resource, because they don't want to buy a grammar book that has 200 pages of rules. This cuts to the chase. These are where the mistakes generally are. I'm also getting other handouts for writing improvement too. The mechanics of writing will be addressed on an ongoing basis, along with the thinking process. Well, classes will be for 2 hours once a week. Students will write an essay every other week, and it won't be a terribly long essay. It won't require research. It requires thinking. On each of these subjects, each of these types of essays rather. Each essay will be critiqued thoroughly by me, and then numerous examples of essays will be shown to them. I have winning essays from the Scholastic Writing Competition, essays from other competitions written by high school students that won prizes. We're going to look at those too, so we can see what the model should be. I mean, how good is it going to be? And I will also have time for one-on-one with them. That is, as the course goes on, we'll talk on the phone together, one-on-one, or looking at our computer screens, and I'll go over the papers that way with them. After I'll also critique them and send them back to them, but we'll also be doing it one-on-one, and that is often very helpful because then it helps me get to understand what the problems are a little better when a student discusses it. Here's one of the handouts: common usage mistakes, and this it's a much longer page than this. I just want to give you a sense of it. These are, again, common usage mistakes that students make and adults all the time. The first one is the capital with the O. It only refers to the government building. That is, every other use of the word capital, it's with the first one, capital. You agree to a thing, you agree with a person. As I agree to your idea, I agree with you. How about principal and principal? Tell me this: if I said, "Oh, agriculture is the principal industry in Ohio," which one is it? LE or PAL? Agriculture is the principal business in Ohio. You have it in your mind? Which one? It's the second one. It's the PAL. And my little trick is, if you can put the word Maine, you can substitute the word Maine, then it's PAL. Like agriculture is the main industry in Ohio, then it's PAL. The principal of a school is the main person. Okay, chord and chord. This is kind of tricky. Obviously, the first one refers to music, right? I'm playing the guitar, I'm playing C chords. The second is string, right? So what are your vocal cords? You would think it would be CHORD because you make sound with your vocal cords. You can sing with your vocal cords, but your vocal cords also look like two strings. So it's CORD. Affect and effect. This has to be one of the 2 or 3 most common problems students have with usage. Affect, what's like, it means to act upon or influence. Effect is to cause something to happen. My little rule of thumb I give them is, if you can substitute the word influence, it's usually affect with the A. If you can substitute the word influence. So let's say the medicine did not affect the patient, did not influence the patient. The movie did not affect me. It didn't influence me as much as it did my little sister. My little sister was really frightened. I wasn't. But effect, I didn't study at all, and the effect was I failed. You wouldn't say the influence was I failed. So it's a very handy way of remembering the difference. It works for me every time. If you can substitute the word, I still do it to this day. If you can substitute the word influence, it's affect. Your insulting doesn't affect me, doesn't influence me. Faint and faint. The last one is to pretend. Canvas, the first one is to cover. Now, both and each. Both means two considered together. Each considers them separately. Both are, each is. There is a commentator on, if you watch the Golf Channel or watch golf games, who talks about this one guy who drives, and he can drive to the right or to the left, either a fade or hook. And he says these are both his things that he does both of them real well. But when he talks about them individually, he keeps saying both instead of each. Fewer and less. This I hear all the time with news commentators, people who are interviewed on television. It's always made this mistake. Fewer means number. And what I tell the students is this: if you can count whatever it is we're talking about, you can say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, it's fewer. You use fewer. Less is used about the whole object, the whole degree. So let's say this: with fewer patients, you can count patients, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If you can count them as fewer, not with less patients. With fewer patients, there will be less revenue. You see where less is that concept. Revenue is a concept. It isn't these individual patients. Use fewer for things that can be counted individually, less for things that cannot. It's that simple. And yet people make that mistake. If you listen carefully within the next 2 or 3 days, you will hear that mistake on some commentator on TV. How about this? This new line of snacks. has less fat, because I can count fat calories, right? Or fat rather, less fat is a concept. You don't count it, and fewer calories. If we have less, no, if we have fewer dollars, we'll make less revenue. If we eat fewer calories, we'll be less fat. It's usually when it's an apostrophe, it means possession. And that's how our mind works. We've seen that a million times. The cat's tail, C-A-T apostrophe S, right? Apostrophe S is possessive, except this breaks the rule. It's without the um, uh, apostrophe that is possessive. It's means it is. Let me tell you this. Every time I've been writing, professionally for a lifetime, every time I use one of those two words, I say it in my mind, the whole thing. I say, is it is? Well, no, it is doesn't fit in. Like the cat is chasing it is tail. If it were an apostrophe, well, no, that doesn't make sense. So it's. It's all right to work nights. That is, it is all right to work nights. I say it out in my mind. It's the only way you really can be sure. And once you do that, you don't make that mistake. That's an extremely common mistake. All these are common. And again, I have a whole list of these. This is just a sampling. The grammar book, I just wanted to give you a sampling of what that is like. Okay, and so this is just a few pages from it. Commas, because students make mistakes with commas all the time. The purpose of a comma is to avoid ambiguity. When you read a sentence and it's a relatively slight pause, such as for an introductory phrase, you probably need a comma. If in doubt, leave it out. So having read the report 3 times, that's an introductory phrase, your voice pauses for a second, he decided to go to bed. Go down to the next one. This is what I was talking about before, the 2 independent clauses. That is two clauses or sentence, 2 groups of words that each one could be a sentence. And it's separated by a conjunction, and, but, or. So I walked to the store. That could be a sentence, right? I bought a new computer. That could be a sentence. You're joining it by and, so you use a comma. Most common, simple, the most common mistake in all punctuation is that comma. Sometimes students will leave it out. I walked to the store, no comma, and I bought a new computer. Well, no, you have those 2 sides. Each is independent. Each could be a sentence. So you need the comma. Or they will put a comma and leave out the and. I walked to the store, comma, I bought a new computer. And the next one is the right way. I walked to the store and bought a new computer, because bought a new computer couldn't stand as a sentence, could it? There's no subject. That's the single most common mistake, called a comma splice. For an introductory phrase like being a sugar freak, comma, I ate the entire cake. Since I forgot my lunch, an introductory phrase, those are pretty obvious. Or in a list, please buy eggs, milk, bread, and cereal. The comma goes before the last one, and cereal at the store. Use commas before and after a state. CNN, when you watch their scrolling at the bottom of the screen, they have removed the comma after New Jersey, let's say. They would put the city like Morristown, comma, New Jersey, but then won't put the comma after New Jersey. So I suspect, language is in a flux. It's always evolving. And I suspect then pretty soon we won't be using that comma after New Jersey, because a lot of people watch CNN. Put a comma before a direct quote. Kate said, comma, I want to gallop off into the sunset. Very often students won't put anything there. Or when you're contrasting things, I ordered pizza, comma, not lasagna. I went out with Sam, not John. And use commas, let's see, the bottom yell, before a phrase that can be removed, like John Crum, PhD, is my manager. You wouldn't have to put the PhD in. Don't use it before because. And you use commas to separate each item in the series A, comma, B, comma, and C. That's sometimes called the Oxford comma. And teachers now in high school often will let you not use the comma after B. They'll call A, comma, B, and C. I think that is not clear. I think that creates confusion. And it puts B and C logically closer together. So I teach it the traditional way. Let's see. Well, here are the 2 independent clauses not separated by a comma. All the windows in my office are in the wrong places. He could have said, and my room is designed to hold in the darkness. He could have put comma and, but I think it's better this way. My room is designed to hold the darkness. He found a wallet that some guy had dropped in the street. The wallet contained pictures of his wife and kids. How about this? Never complain to my boss. It will do no good. Can you see the effectiveness of that semicolon? Never complain to my boss. Because you pause there for a second, it will do no good. Takes on, I think, a greater dramatic importance. It'll do no good. Other forms of punctuation there wouldn't work as well. It would be clear, but it wouldn't work as well. Here's typical what I do. If you can look at this a little bit, anything in red is me. The internet, and it should be capitalized, it's a formal word, is the preeminent tool to education. I put for education. It does not only supplement books and other printed materials, what I put in, but it also challenges the conventional information media and will eventually replace them. And then here, I think he starts to write, sort of ramble a little bit. And I said I would start a new sentence here because it provides the readers with easy access, real-time update, and interactive features. And I said this sentence is too long. The information in the sentence is very good, but the reader may have trouble understanding it in such a long sentence. And that's true. You don't want to have a run-on sentence where you have to reread it 3 times to understand it. The internet, again, didn't capitalize, is a disruptive innovation. It takes the learning, you should just remove it. Delete the, it takes learning to a new territory. Just want to give you an idea of what the corrections look like. And when we talk on the phone, I would talk to him about why he made these and what his thinking is. Here is another essay, and it's about, I just liked it. I mean, tell me if you like it or not. It was the first kind of essay, the narrative essay, which is about something you experienced, but you had to have learned something from it. And this essay, she starts out as a woman, it was kind of okay, but it builds and builds to something very good by the end. And students, they'll often do that. They'll often start out, they're sort of trying to find their footwork. They're trying to put the toe in the water, but once they get started, it really gets good. So let me just go through this with you. I think you'll enjoy it. Travel in New York. This was this young girl. I think she's from California. Travel in New York is hard for tourists from the suburbs. Beautiful first sentence, right? I mean, it tells you something about what her attitude is going to be. That it's hard being a tourist in New York, especially when you're not from New York. Oliver, it's her brother, and I were sitting at the JFK airport watching 4 adults: mom, dad, aunt, and uncle Bill, and Bill, arguing about what colored subway lines to take to get to our hotel. That's a nightmare, by the way. I can just picture the parents going crazy and the young girl and her brother sort of sitting there saying, let's get the show on the road. After running around the city and navigating the New York subway for several hours, we finally stepped up to the hotel. Finally, after all these hours, trying to negotiate the subway, we finally got to the hotel we would be staying at in for the next few days with suitcases in hand. Okay. I was relieved at the sight of a familiar name, Marriott. Oh, yes. I shouldn't have been. Isn't that beautiful? She takes you one emotional side to the other emotional side. I've had this frustrating day. I was so relieved to see the name of the hotel, Marriott. I shouldn't have been. It was too bad too. The rooms we were given reeked of dog urine and were dark and cramped. That happens in New York. Sometimes these rooms are like the postage stamp size. I was ready to cry. Isn't that a beautiful short sentence that really epitomized her emotion at that point? Bad day, right? That night, I laid awake, wide awake, to the sound of loud traffic and New York chatter. I couldn't understand why people loved New York so much. The parts of the city we explored were crowded. The dirty streets reeked of pot. Residents piled up their garbage bags on the sidewalk before it was picked up days later. And, it can be pretty gross. Yeah, I agree. Brushing shoulders with another stranger, I couldn't understand how so many people could fit in such a small place. Remember, she's from a lush suburb somewhere in California without all the space in the world. It is a cultural difference. As a kid born and raised in Sacramento, I was used to quiet suburban neighborhoods and grass fields stretching as far as one could see every time I went somewhere. I mean, there's a nice contrast. One night we went to a Korean cuisine place. Well, I don't think you have to say cuisine place, I mean, a Korean restaurant, right? After waiting 1 hour and 15 minutes on the street, isn't that terrible? We weren't allowed inside. You might imagine if you're hungry, you have to wait an hour and 50 minutes. We weren't allowed inside, and no one wanted to try another restaurant. We were finally seated. The restaurant was filled with young people of all different colors, chatting, eating, and enjoying their night. And so she's looking around and says, that's not so bad. Watching them and filling my stomach with tasty food, my resentment for New York alleviated a little. Alleviated is a wonderful word there, isn't it? She misspelled little too, by the way. It's a wonderful alleviate that suddenly the pain is a little less. It's not away yet, but you know, this is a little bit better than what I have been doing. On the way back to our hotel, I love this paragraph. Let me tell you. Here she gets into stride. We walked into Times Square. Around this time in Sacramento, the city would be sleeping, not Times Square. Times Square was alive. Beautiful, short, pithy sentence. Towering, incandescent building parted in the middle of the street for people. And there's that building that is sort of like a wedge in the middle of Broadway. Teenagers skateboarded. Musicians played instruments. I mean, if you're in Times Square, you're seeing the whole world walk by. Huge screens on the building played advertisements and music. At one end of the square, there was a huge platform with people sitting there doing nothing. Now, isn't that a wonderful description? She's looking around and suddenly she's amazed. This is New York. This is the pulsating city, right? Skateboarding, musicians playing their instruments, on their own. Beautiful buildings, people on a huge platform just sitting there doing nothing. Time seemed frozen. Isn't that a beautiful sentiment? That as you're experiencing something so wonderful, time seems frozen. I want it to stay forever. I want to picture this in my mind forever. I want it to freeze. People sat on the platform watching others without realizing they themselves formed a view for others to watch. It's people watching people. Strangers sat shoulder to shoulder, like family. Well, before she didn't like the fact that it was so crowded, but now she sees that, yeah, they're friends. They didn't know each other, and they didn't even talk to each other, but we're all together. We're common humanity. They felt content just existing in such a big world at that moment. That's a lovely sentiment too, isn't it? They felt content just being alive in this big world in front of us at that special moment in this girl's life. This was a special moment for her. She never had seen Times Square, had bad experience so far with her New York trip, but suddenly she has this epiphany that I see that there's another side to the city. It's a real city, warts and all. They felt content just existing in such a big world at that moment. I could barely hear my own voice over the noise of New York, right? The lights were blinding, even though it was nighttime. You could read a newspaper at night. I wondered if it is like this in the summer, what would it be like on New Year's Eve? I almost thought I could feel the city breathing. Yeah, wait. Think of that sentence too. I could feel the city breathing. That is, cities don't breathe. But this city for her right now has become a living organism. It's become something that's real, that's alive. It's breathing. After Times Square, New York became glamorous to me. There was her turn, right? That was the epiphany. That's why this narrative essay is important to her. It changed my mind about a whole city. The graffiti on the walls and the unrenovated buildings were a sign of art, an old history. It's not just dirt. The crowded streets became lively and exciting. Everything now has changed. Everyone there seemed unapologetically themselves. True. New York was the furthest thing away from home a Californian could experience. Just about. I thought that New York had its faults, but it was fitting for someone who couldn't stand normality like me. Maybe one day I will move there after I graduate from college. I could almost bet you dollars to donuts she's going to move there after college. That's that wonderful awakening that a student has. And to be able to, I say, to record it like that, to keep this essay and read it to your grandchildren would be wonderful. It was just a wonderful experience that she expresses so wonderfully. Now, this course is 2 hours, 8 sessions, 2 hours each, February 11th to April 8th. It'll be on Friday, 4:30, 7:30 Eastern time, 4:30 Pacific time. And we'll have also several hours of one-on-one. Any questions about this course? Okay, here's another one. This description will be shorter. It's literary appreciation and writing, and it'll be 8 sessions, again, every week, 2 hours per session, starting February 11th. That's next Saturday. Is it? It's next. No, it's the 11th. February 12th is the Saturday, I think. Saturday, 1 p.m. Pacific time, 4 p.m. Eastern time. And again, there'll be one-on-ones. I think that should read February 12th, since, Now, what will this be? Well, it'll be pretty much what the name implies. I'll select with them some literature works, poetry, prose, a little bit of drama. Students will study, discuss, and write every other week about outstanding works of poetry and prose. And these will be, works that they're going to be reading in college. They'll love them. They're just, good things to read. There'll be some poems by William Wordsworth about nature, Robert Browning. James Joyce has the best short story I think I've ever read was by James Joyce. I'm going to have them read it. It's called Araby. And it takes place when James Joyce was living in Dublin. He was about 13 years old, yes. And he was going to Araby as a fair in town. Remember, this is drab, horrible, dirty Dublin when he was young, turn of the century, 19th century. And this fair represented everything that he wanted to see. And it also, he had a first love he wanted to get a present for. It's a wonderful story of a boy, an event that happened to a boy growing up. And it doesn't end the way you would anticipate. It doesn't have a happy ending. Sometimes, an incident like this, let's say a growing up incident, can be bittersweet. It can be, okay, but also hurt a little bit, like a first love. We'll do William Shakespeare. I want to do some soliloquies from Hamlet. You can't get any better than that. And some of his sonnets, I think the students will like, only 12, 14 lines long, and I think the students will like them. John Keats, who has lush imagery, and others. So we're going to analyze them. And I'll have other, by the way, all sorts of poetry for them to be reading in between. We'll analyze them, not just what an author says, but how he or she says it. But that's what makes art different from just a newspaper article or a magazine article. It's how the person says it, discussing figurative language, metaphors, imagery, to determine how art functions, not just what it says. And again, I'll use the grammar book, the usage booklets, all those other things that I use in the other class. Here's something special that Philip thought some people might be interested in, and I do too. Research writing and tutoring. I'm the tutor. Let's say you have a student who really is interested in something that the student really loves it, is almost obsessed by it, or very much interested in it. Global warming, race relations, just the whole range of topics. No end to the topics, an infinite number of topics. And we would just do this one-on-one, no group session, because this is an individual project that the student likes. When I say topics must be approved by the instructor, I have had, I don't mean this to sound vain, a pretty broad knowledge of the world. I've studied many things. I've lived abroad many years too. I could handle probably most topics except something that is very scientific or mathematical. If a student is really into, let's say, in depth into, let's say, a physics issue or a chemistry issue or a mathematical issue, I probably would not be good at that. In fact, I wouldn't be good at that. But on anything else in the humanities, history, politics, architecture, well, all those disciplines, I have more than a passing interest and knowledge. And if I didn't, I'm just telling the student, well, no, I'm just not adequate to talk about, the Pythagorean theorem. But I think that's probably rare. I think I would be able to handle most topics, and we'd work together until the student said, well, yeah, I have a pretty good research paper now. Well, now your questions. I'm sure you must have some questions by now. Anyone? Philip, do you see anyone interested in asking?
Yicheng, do you have any question?
I think I don't really have any questions.
Okay, yeah, how about that? I'll share with you the one-on-one session, what a one-on-one session will look like. Let me share the screen. Oh, take time.
Paragraph, nicely developed an idea. Your punctuation was good. You have no, writing problems. Let me say this, and I always tell the students, we all know that writing is a form of communication, but it's also a form of thinking. Our thinking, as we write, we think about the topics more thoroughly. We see more in them. We see shades of differences. We see contradictions in the topic. My major criticism of your essay is you tell us without showing us. I mean, you make statements about things, but we want to see some example from Didion's work. And so it tends to become repetitive.
Okay.
You come back to that same phrase that things are worse than they seem. That must be repeated maybe 4 or 5 times. And so what I want you to do is to think about not telling us, but showing us. Let's go to the second paragraph now, okay? Or marriage, okay? Really good. And interrupt me at any time, too. Marriage is often seen in modern society as a momentous event and is often associated with positive connotation. Wonderful. Great first sentence, tells you exactly what we're talking about. We're going to talk about marriage, and it is momentous and it is positive. However, this is just a stylistic point. The most important parts of a sentence are the beginning and the end. And so you don't want to use weak words at the beginning because that's what people tend to remember. So I would always bury, however, or for example, a few words in. Like Joan destroys this idea, however, with her essay, Marriage.
They said this is just a short recorded video.
Are there any questions about our goals and how we'll go about achieving them? We've tried to be specific and detailed so that you have an understanding of what we're up to, what we're trying to accomplish, and the methodology we'll use for accomplishing it. I believe your child will benefit from any of these courses.
Yeah, I got a question. How many homeworks, how many essays do the students have?
They'll have to, I'm sorry for interrupting. They'll have to write an essay every other week. I understand that they're in school. They have, piles of work to do. and they have extracurricular activities, and that this isn't their main life. So I think having a paper every other week wouldn't be burdensome, and it's a short paper, really. It's maybe a page and a half, maybe 400 words, 450 words, so anywhere in that area. If they think about it, when they're watching TV at night or just sort of think about it in their room, then I think that the idea will sort of grow in their minds, and then they can sit down and put it on the screen. And if they're having a particularly tough week, if they have 4 AP exams on one day, of course they can hand the paper in later then. I mean, we have to be realistic, but I do not want the course to be burdensome. I want it to be something that they look forward to, that they see that it's useful, and that it's worth the time they're spending. If something is useful, it's usually worth the time people spend on it. It's when something isn't useful, when it's not accomplishing anything, that's when I think people get antsy and feel they're wasting their time.